on with Ludovica de Paolis from SISSA. She will talk about synthesizing and representing naturalistic visual textures with deep neural networks. Thank you.
Thank you. So hi everyone, I am Ludovica. I'm actually a hybrid. I started as a philosopher and now I do a PhD in cognitive neuroscience, and I train and do analysis on neural networks for modeling vision, and hence my title, Synthesizing and Representing Naturalistic Visual Textures with Deep Neural Networks. So I'm going to start by prompting you an experiment. Look at this image and then look at this other image. I see some confused space, and the reason is because I think in the first image you saw very clearly that there is an object in the background. In the second case, you did, but probably you took some time some extra milliseconds. And the reason is that the two cats in the environment are actually perceived by you differently. Why? Because they display different features in terms of luminance, contrast, and color. The first cat, the orange one, is brighter, is more contrasting with respect to the environment, and has a different color, while the second cat, the gray one, has less luminance, is less contrasting with the background, and has a more similar color. And what have you witnessed in the first person is what in neuroscience we call the principle of efficient coding. Efficient coding states that a sensory system, and in this case the visual system, is tuned to the statistical properties of its natural input. So in the case of the second gray cat, it took more time because your visual system was like not seeing anything relevant. And this is due to efficient coding. It is tuned. And the second concept that I want you to keep in mind for my work is the concept of visual textures. Visual textures are defined as a family of patterns that share certain local statistics. And then we are going more technical with the concept of texture synthesis, which is an image processing technique which is useful for studying efficient coding, because what I do is I study efficient coding and other properties by means of visual textures, and I synthesize visual textures by using generative models of AI. And all of these concepts are put together and justified in the context of cognitive neuroscience by the fact that we know that the mammalian visual system encodes textures efficiently, according to efficient coding, but the experimental results are limited to low-order correlations among close pixels that do look like textures, but are not very naturalistic. So the textures that I've been talking about so far that have been tested on the human visual system are of this kind. These are two very famous physics and mathematics informed model for texture synthesis, the one by Victor and Conte and the one by Porfirio and Simoncelli. And these models are based on the so-called Euler's conjecture, which was stated in 1973, according to which image textures can be modeled based on low-order statistics. And this what it means. It means that Hughes, even before all of these models were published, already had understood somehow that textures only can be modeled by low-order statistical computations among close pixels. And these are the results with these models. They are not naturalistic looking. They are patterns, they are textures, but not very naturalistic. And this is not very useful for studying how the visual system of mammalian works, because we are exposed to a visual system, to a visual environment which has more naturalistic looking textures, just like the background texture that you see with leaves. Recently, another model of texture synthesis was published, and it worked very well because the resulting textures are very naturalistic. This is a synthesized textures. It represents pebbles, and it was the first deep neural network for texture synthesis. So in general, for synthesizing images or for classifying images, etc., for working images, we use in machine learning the so-called convolutional neural networks. And this model is exactly a convolutional neural network. It produces nice textures, they're naturalistic, but the model is obscure. However, keep in mind that also this model is still based on the fact on the Euler's conjecture, because even if it exploits the representation of a neural network, it is still based on low-order statistics. I am personally working on another model, which is a generative model for image processing and for texture synthesis. The name is variational autoencoder, but I'm not going to go into the details. And what it does, it basically samples from a probability distribution to learn how to synthesize new sample of textures, just like the one that you see at my left, and from a set of original images of textures, like the one that you see at my right. And again, the way the model learns how to compute this texture is by means of these matrices that you see at the bottom that very simply, again, calculates low-order statistical correlation among pixels in these images. So the functioning of my model is very complicated, but keep in mind that it is still going under the assumption that textures are a model on low-order statistics. And in order to train my model, I'm currently using this data set. It's called the describable texture data set. And very crucially, it is a supervised or annotated data set. It has several instances, like over 5,000 images of textures. And crucially, all of these textures have been divided into classes and annotated by human beings into different classes. And I have replicated this one algorithm, and I tested it on this data set, and the results are this. They are pretty, I would say, impressive, because the textures are generated, they are of a good quality, but most importantly, as you can see, even the generated textures kind of belong to the class of their original match. You can see that they are braided, they're bubbly, they're knitted. And this is impressive because in this data set, we have we do not only have the images, we have the labels, so the text, the classes that are associated to the images, which led me to reconsider a bit all the models that I have presented so far, including the one that I'm training, that are under the assumption of the Yule's conjecture. I thought, is it true that all the image textures can be modeled on low-order statistics? Maybe some of these textures can be captured by their semantic attributes, and we can exploit these data sets and the relative annotations, and everything was human-based, to investigate if semantic attributes have an impact on the generation and on the modeling of visual textures. So what I did is I took images from the describable texture dataset. I fed them into this model, which is called CLIP, and it is a multimodal language for image and text. And I basically asked CLIP to classify all of the images into their relative label. And I want to stress the fact that this model is not trained on this specific data set. This specific data set, it's kind of a problematic, complicated data set because it represents textures, but the model actually succeeds. We have almost 70% accuracy of correct classification for each image, which means that the model is able to classify correctly 70% of the images of textures, which brought me to basically explore the idea that textures are not only a statistical property of the visual scenes or of the visual system, but they are instead an entity that can be captured by semantics. And in particular, I have this new hypothesis where textures are laying on a spectrum, and they are going from like those more pixel looking like images to object like images. And if we treat textures as an object, as we are doing with semantics, instead of as a property, as the previous models did by exploiting their statistical correlations, if we treat them as an object, then we can exploit their semantic attributes and give them a new, let's say, a new theory, a new study that exploit also their semantic attributes. And this is my conclusion. This is one references. And if you have any questions, I'm here.
Thanks for the talk. Questions? Right.
Hi, thanks. Can you elaborate a bit more in the penultimate point that you made? This I didn't understand why you need to have this sort of why these two hypotheses cannot fit in a single framework. In what sense thinking of the texture as an object sort of prevents you from thinking that texture can be understood from low order statistics?
Yeah. So the point is that if you read all the literature and all the models that are based on texture synthesis that you already talked about it are based on low order correlations, they start from the idea that the visual system is, in particular, the first stages of the visual system, the very first stages of the visual cortex in the brain, they can capture only spatial features that can be put together as low order statistics. And this is where these models are associating the textures with respect to the brain. But the new hypothesis that I make doesn't completely discard. I mean, I still think that textures can be still modeled using low order statistical correlations, but textures that look more like objects, like these ones or the pebbles one by Gauss, are not sufficiently captured by statistics. And actually, I didn't display here, but I did some analysis on the models that's the Gauss model, and the losses that optimize these images from different classes behave differently, totally differently. And I suspect, and also I did extra analysis on CLIP. I did like this plot I also did for per class accuracy, and it follows more or less the same trend. So different behaviors, different accuracies for different classes. And this led me to think that, in conclusion, that if we treat textures not as a property of the visual system, that is, we do not only rely on the theory that textures can be captured by modeling the very early stages of the visual cortex, but we treat them as an object that could be captured by integrating multimodal information like semantic information, other kind of information. These statistical properties are necessary but not sufficient, and semantics intervene to model other kind of textures that look like more objects and cannot simply be fully captured as the losses behavior and as the per accuracy class plot display, which I don't have here, but doesn't make sense. So they lay on a spectrum, basically. The spectrum also includes statistics, but also semantics. And so far, semantic has not been explored as a component to model textures.
The model you presented before the clip, which was the autoencoder, right?
It's very
You were limiting it to capture low level.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. If that works, it's another line of research, because that basically the idea is that still it's a model that is it's respecting Yule's conjecture, so the word is statistical correlation. But with respect to the other models, it has a latent space that allows exploration for, we suppose, higher order correlations. But this is still, it doesn't include semantics. It's not.
Thank you for the talk. So you said that now you're putting texture and the semantic together, but don't you think that if you take a very abstract texture and then you put it in your algorithm somehow, it will try to recognize objects because you have that semantic part within? Or is it capable of making the difference of this is not an object, this is something completely abstract, for example?
You're talking about this model, right? Yes, of course, this model is trained to capture statistics. It has like, I don't know if you're familiar, but the loss is basically designed to push together images and text. So it is trained to it is trained to capture semantics. The fact that even if I put, like, for instance, this one super pixelated texture that doesn't look like an object at all could return a classification, so could return a label, does it mean anything? I mean, it could be an accuracy, a precision error, but of course, with images, that the point is that this data set instead has a gold standard, has a basis that we can refer to. So in this case, we have a reference. In this other case, the pixel one, if it does, it doesn't mean anything.
Okay, great. Otherwise, we can go on. Thank you, Ludovica, again.